Hey Dave, how you doing today?
Not bad, Nick. How are you?
It's a beautiful day. I can't complain. Beautiful
Yeah.
fall day in Michigan.
Well, the complaint would be that we're sitting inside recording a podcast, right?
That's right. That's
So
right.
I used to, back when I worked in a bank, I used to have people come in on beautiful days, and I'd be like, "Let's just get this over with as quick as we can, because there's no need to sit around and talk about money today."
I like it. I like it.
Yeah, yeah. So this is episode 50. I noted.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
We are
yeah.
we are at the big 5-0.
Yeah, yeah. We should be shooting fireworks off or having confetti or something.
That's right. Pop the
Yeah,
champagne bottles.
yeah, yeah. So today we're continuing a series we started last week on our strategic, reliable blueprint financial plan and that process and what that looks like.
Yeah, so this is phase two of that plan. So we talked last week about the fit meeting, and now
Hmm.
we are headed into the foundations meeting.
Yeah, the foundations meeting, and sounds pretty heady. Um, so you usually run these meetings, so I'm going to kind of ask you to walk us through what the agenda looks like for that meeting.
Yeah, absolutely. So the foundations meeting is probably one of my favorites. It's certainly up there. And it, like it sounds, it's kind of laying the foundation for the work that we do. And so, really, what it is, obviously there's some technical stuff that goes on and contracts and all that nonsense. But the main part of the foundations meeting and the part I enjoy is just kind of this thought behind, hey, we are at the very front end of creating a financial plan for you. And so we need to lay the foundation. And what might come as a surprise to a lot of people is how we lay that foundation is we really ask them, a question, which is essentially, what is important to you? What elements do you need in your life to live a fulfilling life? um, and as a planner, that's a lot of fun for me because I get to ask that question and essentially listen to all kinds of different answers, and really get to know clients on a very neat level. And oddly enough, you're thinking, okay, we're doing a financial plan, so we're going to come in and we're going to set the foundation
Yeah,
by giving me a whole bunch of financial
data.
information and numbers.
Yeah,
Right? Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And
Tis
so,
Yeah,
go ahead, Dave.
traditionally it's been a data dump. It's been, hey, here's all my statements. Let's sift through how many shares of Fidelity Balanced Fund I own, and how much exactly I'm putting in my 401k. And
Right,
it's really
exactly.
not
And
the where we start. Yeah,
yeah, it's not where we start, and it's interesting. We will get that information. That's absolutely a part of the process. But I love the analogy of a jigsaw puzzle. So for our listeners, if you've ever put a jigsaw puzzle together, you probably have the most important piece to you. I usually ask people, what's the most important piece of a jigsaw puzzle, and they'll say, well, the corners or the borders, or some people say the last piece. I think that's because they don't like to put jigsaw puzzles
right,
together. So being
right.
done is the most important thing.
Or
And it's a little
all
bit
the
of a trick
pieces that have
question,
their
but
favorite color. Yeah,
that's right. That's right. It's a little bit of a trick question because the reality is the most important piece is not a piece at all. It's the picture on the box. And in financial planning, it's the same exact way. The goal of the financial plan is to help you get your money in order to live a fulfilled life. And so the most important piece of the financial plan is kind of this vision of what you want it to all look like when we're done. And so instead of going in and getting the technical data, instead of getting the money and the numbers and that stuff, what we figure out is the first part, this foundations, is what's important to you, and not just like what's most important to you. Tell us everything that's important to you. And then we really get into figuring out who you are and what you want this to start looking like. And then the next phase 3, is that vision meeting where we'll start to prioritize those and get a good idea of what you want that picture to look like, and what's important, and what maybe can push off for later on. And so it's just this concept of Let's get everything on the table. Let's find out everything that's ever been important to you or you think will be important to you. And talk about those things and really get a good idea, a good understanding as planners of what that is, and making sure that we put those important things into your financial plan.
You got it. Yeah. And so you've got clients that come in, they've had the fit meeting, so they're not totally, this isn't coming totally out of the blue, but, do you get that little bit of deer in the headlights look sometimes when all of a sudden we're not talking about how many shares of a particular mutual fund they own, but instead what they're, you know, how they prioritize their goals in their life?
Yeah, that's a great question, Dave, because usually what tends to happen is when I ask that question, the clients will bring that into the financial realm. So they'll
Mm-hmm.
assume that we're talking about something financially that's important to them.
Yep.
And I would counter with, 98% of the decisions that you make in life have some sort of financial
Yes. You
ramification.
you can't separate those two spheres. You just can't. That's why
Right.
we do this.
Exactly. And so, yes, financial stuff, and we'll get into that. We have the technical knowledge to help you with that. But the way that we do it is to make sure that we know what's most important to you, and then we make your money work so that you can have a fulfilled life. And so, the financial knowledge, and one of the reasons why we have the fit meeting, going back to our last podcast on the fit meeting, is if we don't have the financial knowledge, so if there's something in your plan that we aren't comfortable that we know the answers to or can help you find the answers to, then we won't take on the clients, which is why that fit meeting is so important. So at this stage of the game, we know that we have the financial knowledge and we can help you. And it's really about finding out what's important to you and then kind of putting those pieces together. Because if you go back to that analogy, if we just start moving the pieces around, if we just start saying, okay, well, you should, invest this way and you should do this with this stock option and you should do this with this insurance, we're leaving ourselves open to a lot of potential problems because we haven't focused on what's important to you. We're making decisions based on just the numbers. And what I
Well, and
always say about that.
to me, taking the other approach takes you back to, more the brokerage realm where it's just about what's the return of this investment been, and I'm selling you an investment that has a potential return, but may not have anything to do with what you're trying to do in life.
Absolutely. And so what I tell people is we have we have the answers. I can give you the answers, but the problem is the answer is you should live in a cardboard box with a
Right.
multi-million dollar, stock
Right.
bond portfolio investment account, and you should, so your expenses should be as low as
Yeah.
possible and your savings and returns and investments should be as high as possible. But
Yeah.
I don't think
And your
anybody comes
misery
into my
index. Yeah.
office. Yeah, exactly. I don't think anybody comes into the office to hear that they should, be basically homeless and investing and saving every
Right.
penny that they
Right.
make.
Right.
And so,
Right.
what's that balance and what's important to you? Because once we identify what that is, then now you and I are making decisions or helping people make decisions on, okay, this is going to get you closer to what you really want to get out of life. It might not be the best financial answer, but it's going to get you closer to what you want your life to look like. And you can still do it financially now and in 5 and 10 and 15 years from now. That's the right answer for you, even though it might mathematically not be the best case scenario.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's trying to find that balance for different individuals is really what it's all about, and why you have to start where we start. And to me, that's what makes this interesting. You can have two people walk in on different days with identical portfolios and the same job and the same balances in their bank account and maybe even the same spending, but they're going to think about it differently. Their
Right.
approach to risk and reward and goals are not going to be the same. They never are going to be the same. And they're going to change from month to month and year to year. So that's what really drives the excitement you get out of this as a career, is being able to help answer those questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And if it wasn't that way, if it was just about the numbers, or if that's how
Oh,
you want your financial plan to go, you should,
yeah,
invest in a computer program, not a financial
right,
planner, because they're going
right,
to give you
right.
the printout of what the best financial sense makes.
Yeah, yeah. Then it's all commoditized, but people don't fit into those neat little formulas quite as well.
Yeah,
Um, what do they call it in economics class? Homo economicus, the perfectly rational being who always makes
right.
the most optimal decisions with their money.
Yeah,
And as Danny Kahneman and several other behavioral economists showed, over the last 20 years, that person does not exist and never will, never
no.
has, never will. Yeah.
Right, exactly, exactly. And so another interesting thing, another reason why I love this step in the process is, as humans, we rarely take time, in today's day and age when we got cell phones and meetings and stuff constantly going on, rarely do we take time and just think about what's important to us and think about what we want to do and what we want to make sure that we accomplish. And this is that cool meeting where we essentially give clients the space to think about those things and have that conversation. And a lot of clients walk away saying, man, that was one of the best conversations I've ever had, even though realistically it's not a conversation in that I'm not doing a whole lot of the talking, they are. But a
Right.
lot of times, and I've been on the other end of this process too, being life plan myself, it's
Yeah.
just that we never give ourselves time to think about these things or talk
Right.
about these things. And so to
Well,
have that is really cool.
and another interesting aspect of it is often spouses don't talk about it on that level.
Mm,
And, with you there as the mediator asking questions on time that they're basically paying us for, um, kind of, I don't want to say force. I think that's the wrong word, but kind of helps people focus and bring things to the table that maybe they haven't talked to each other about on the same level. And so that's always interesting too.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because you're so right. It's this situation where, it almost, I would say, every other meeting or so that we're doing with couples, there's one couple that says, "Man, I never realized that
I didn't
about
know
the
that
other
was
one." And
important to
that,
you.
yeah,
Right.
right. And it's
Yeah.
so cool. But, and speaking of couples, usually what's important to them isn't the same. And so that's why it's so important to have, separate time and address each of them kind of separately. And then what happens to the other one is they hear something that maybe they didn't know, or they get something reiterated to them. And it just kind of really helps bring them together, which I think is another awesome part of this
Right.
process
Well, and I
is,
think my experience has been there's like this fear and this reluctance that between them that it's going to push them further apart because they don't agree.
mm-hmm,
When instead it tends to have the opposite effect because then they start thinking about how to work together towards those goals, even if they seem at odds. And I always liked that story from I think from George Kinder himself about the husband whose dream was to sail the world and the wife who was seasick or got
yeah,
seasick.
yeah,
And the compromise, and long story short, they come to a compromise where and what was important to her was doing things with her grandkids. And so she would fly
mm-hmm,
with the grandkids to meet him in different ports, you know.
yeah.
So yeah, for every problem, there's a solution. You just have to be more creative sometimes.
Absolutely. And it's so important. And this is why we, all but require, I mean, it's not technically a requirement, but mostly we push for both of the clients to be in that room having these conversations together for these reasons, but also because, if you are going through this process and we're creating a plan for you and you're living this fulfilled life and your partner or spouse isn't, that's not ever going to end well. And so that's why we really want to have both of them in the room and working on this process to both get to that point. Because if you're both there and you're both feeling good about the direction and doing these things and making these changes, then you can have good conclusions, you can have good successes. But if it's just one of the two, that oftentimes doesn't work out well.
Yep. Yep. So
But yeah, in a nutshell, that's our foundations meeting. That's how we lay the foundation for, the financial plan is starting by, figuring out what's important and all the things that are important. And then we head into phase two, which we'll talk about next time, the vision meeting, where we go through and prioritize those things and figure out, what's the top priority and what's something that, hey, that'd be fun to do, but if I never got around to it, it wouldn't be something that I regretted. And so how do we kind of
Yeah.
prioritize those in planning?
Yeah. Really getting to the core of what, and, you know, I'm gonna address something here real quick that came to my mind the first time I started talking with, not with clients, but when I first started having this process explained to me was, yeah, but what about the money? You know,
Mm-hmm.
and just to remind people, in the background, we're synthesizing the accounts and the budget and looking at these things to then eventually bring this overarching goal into like what bite-sized pieces can we afford to do now, and how do we work towards those.
Absolutely. And it's always interesting to me going through and doing these foundation meetings that a lot of the stuff that comes out of them, the important parts of life, aren't necessarily monetarily
Right,
related, maybe like you would think they are. It's
right,
not,
or
hey, we really want to have a beach house in Malibu. That, it comes up
yeah,
sometimes as part of what
sure.
people want, but a lot of times it's not as monetary as maybe you might think.
Right, or to take that a step further, what is it about a beach house in Malibu that's going to be out of reach for all but a handful of people? What is it about that appeals to you, and how can you
Right.
replicate that without $10 million to buy Charlie Sheen's house or something?
Yeah, exactly. Why do you want that? Picture yourself in that beach house in Malibu. What are the emotions? What are you trying to
Right,
create? And
right,
usually there's a lot of different ways to do that without maybe having a beach house on
yeah,
Malibu, which, only a fraction of people in existence can even do
yeah,
with the rates and things in California. So,
right. 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 So good. Well, and so we'll move on to the vision session discussion next week when we record. And this has been good.
yeah, yep. So next up is vision, and we'll get into that next week. And then also, as this is going on, like you said, we'll probably also be doing organization as well. And so we'll talk about
Yeah.
that as a part of the
Cover that
process that
too.
kind of
Yeah.
goes on while the other stuff is happening. So,
Right.
but
Yeah.
yeah,
That's a good way to approach it. Yeah.
this is
Good.
our foundation. Now we've laid the foundation, and it's time to prioritize and create that vision and go from there. So we'll get into that next week.
All right. Well, I'll talk to you then.
Great. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks,
Always a
Nick.
pleasure.
Yep. Talk to you later.